Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're going to be taking a look at this pair of women's shoes. Now you're probably asking yourself, why in the world are you bringing us a video today on women's shoes? Well, a couple reasons for this. Let me tell you a little story here, a little quick story time here. So first of all, these are not just any pair of women's shoes. These are by the designer Christian Louboutin, if I'm pronouncing that anywhere close to being correct. And so that is a line of high fashion designer women's shoes. This brand of shoes is famous for their red bottoms. In fact, as I understand it, they have a trademark on red bottom shoes that other manufacturers cannot sell. And so if you look at these, you can see that the red bottoms have been scuffed. So this is the pair of shoes that my wife wore at our wedding, and a couple of her other sisters have also worn them. And my wife happens to have another sister getting married later on this summer in 2020 who also wants to wear the, I guess now we'll call them the family pair of Louboutin wedding shoes. And my sister-in-law had a request that we try to fix up these shoes to make them, quote, look nice. So, a couple of things here. Why is it even worthwhile to try to fix these up? Well, the number that stands out as to why is to buy a pair of shoes like this, besides the sentimental value that her sisters have worn them, and that goes with that something borrowed category, is this pair of shoes is valued at, now I hope you're sitting down when I say this, at about $1,200 for a pair of shoes. That is a lot more than my sister-in-laws want to spend on a pair of shoes. But they did, and we have them in the family now. And yes, these are a genuine Louboutin. If you look at the, hopefully it comes through on camera, the seal in the back and the right under the heel there, you can see, maybe I got to turn this around here. This is the genuine Louboutin, made in Italy, size 37 shoe. And so today we're going to be refinishing the bottom of these shoes so they look nice for my sister-in-law's wedding. So we've got a few products that we're going to use to help us do this, to make this look right. The tools and items you're going to need for this project are going to be as follows. First, we're going to need the walk-on red leather shoe paint. This is from a company called Angelus, if I'm pronouncing that right. This is probably as close as we're going to get in a red color to the very specific Louboutin color. I'm not sure it's going to be a perfect match, but it should be pretty close. If you need to touch up the edges of the shoes, you're going to want to get the black color as well. And then you want to finish this off to try to seal this up with a little bit of this acrylic finisher. Before getting started, you're going to want to use a sanding sponge, about 150 grit. You may also want to get a 220 and higher grits to try to kind of sand out any other imperfections in the bottom of the sole. But you don't want to sand it too deep, but you need something, you need to rough it up a little bit so that the paint can adhere to it. If it's piano slick, it's not going to adhere to it very well. And then to apply the red and the black paint, you're going to want a set of paint brushes. Get yourself a brand new set of paint brushes that are perfectly clean, never been used before. Given the value of the shoes that we're dealing with, there is no reason to use used brushes. Get a decent set of brushes. You can get these for just a few dollars. And relatively speaking, it's certainly going to be worth it to make sure you get the outcome that you want. And then the final item the final two items you're going to need is you're going to want like a little bit of a shop towel to be able to apply the acrylic finisher. And then perhaps some cardboard or other clean surface to work on, because you want to make sure that the surface area that you're working is very clean and dirt-free, that you don't have any other lint or debris flying around, so that as the paint dries, you get a nice clean finish as you start applying the paint. Because you're going to want to apply this over a couple of coats. This may take you a day or 2 or 3, depending upon how much time you have to allocate between coats amongst other projects that you may be working on. I'll put links to all these products down below in the description. If you're interested in those, click those links and I'll take you right to these products here on Amazon and you can pick them all up. Well, except for the cardboard box, because you'd get the cardboard box if you ordered any of these from Amazon just by virtue of how it would ship to you. Likely, unless they send it to you in that little brown cardboard mailing envelope that is annoying to most of us. But I digress. So let's get started with this project. The first step in the restoration process is going to be to take a sanding sponge. This is a Norton 150 grit sponge. There's a few other ways that you could do this here, but this provides enough rigidity and flexibility to be able to work around the curves on the bottom of the shoes. And then we're going to take the shoes one at a time, and we're going to lightly scuff the bottom just to make sure any loose paint or anything else on there we get scratched off and removed. Because if whenever we go to refinish these, the paint will not want to stick. It will flake off if there's any other loose paint on there. And since the red bottom is, in my opinion, probably 3/4 of the appeal of these shoes. Now, in my opinion, I think the shoes you wear does not define you as a person, but obviously some people enjoy wearing expensive, high-fashion, exclusive brands, and that's their thing. Apparently, my idea of wearing a nice pair of bridal work boots, that is just not in my sister-in-law's wheelhouse of things that she would likely do. And especially as a professional musician, I know she prides herself on her appearance quite a bit. Now there's a little bit of other damage on the shoe here, especially where the sole turns into the black part, that we're going to do our best to try to keep the red with the red, but there's going to be just a little bit here in the front on the toe. I don't think anyone's going to notice if we refinish this all being red that there might be just a few little idiosyncrasies for where this actually changes color. We also notice that from wearing that the rest of the heel here retains the factory Louboutin color. And so now that we got this lightly scuffed, we don't need to rub this too hard, just light enough to be able to remove any light dust or debris and to make sure that any of the other finish that's here doesn't get damaged. And now on to the finishing. We're going to take our special walk-on red paint. There's the view of the label, as I mentioned earlier. And we're going to shake this up a little bit just to make sure it's all mixed. I also found a cardboard box to lay down on top of my workbench to make sure that this stays clean. And then with this paint shaken up, so you're going to want to make sure you start with a nice clean brush. You can pick up a set of these brushes relatively cheap. I'll put a link below to these brushes and the specific shade of red, although this is not officially from Louboutin. And as far as I can tell, Louboutin does not sell an official touch-up kit. I think as a company, they would rather you just buy new shoes rather than touch up their trademarked red shoe finish. But in any case, we've got the Angelos Walk-On Red color that we're going to be using today. All right, so our shoe painting strategy today is we're going to be focusing on basically the worn part of the shoe. And then we'll kind of blend it back into the rest of the existing Louboutin finish. And so I'm just going to start, and this is going to take several coats for this to actually go through. You're also going to want to make sure you have a means that you can have the shoe dry, face up. So again, why I have this box here, this will help me keep the shoe clean and with the sole face up when it comes time to dry. You're going to want to make sure you brush out any thicker parts of your coat, because this is not going to all come back in one coat of paint. This is going to take several. So don't expect instantaneous results, We're going to have to let this dry. And then I will probably need to come back with a little bit of black paint to touch up the edges that are supposed to be black. And that will sit like that for now. We're going to let this dry for a little bit, then we will come back again for our next part, for our second coat of paint. We are back and ready to apply a second coat of paint. We'll take a look and see how the first coat has dried. Get that back a little bit. You can see it looks like, you know, in the spots that was darker, or that was not in as, you can see that in the areas that were not in need as much repair, it's definitely darkened up, but we need to get this to be the same consistent shade. And that transition spot towards the ball of the foot, we can see there's a reasonable blend, but we're definitely going to need at least another coat here, maybe another second, and maybe even a third coat. I have now applied about, I want to say up to about 7 or 8 coats of paint onto the bottom of the shoes. We can see we've got a nice uniform color. One little thing here to point out, and I'm not sure how well this is going to show up on camera, is the walk-on red, let me get the jar right, the walk-on red paint that I was using appears just a little bit brighter than what the authentic Louboutin color is, or is. Now, as far as to why that is, I can conjecture a couple different reasons. Number one, perhaps the Angela shoe paint is purposely off by a shade to avoid trademark or copyright issues, or have faded a little bit over the last few years between the couple weddings that these have been worn in and being in storage. I don't know. I have also touched up the sides a little bit using the walk-on black, and so I think I've got this looking as good as I think it's going to get. There's a few little imperfections in terms of the sole that where it's just not quite as flat as it was, or as I would desire. And so between going back and forth and letting it dry, so far this has taken me a couple of days to be able to get a nice uniform color across the soles of these shoes. There's a classic photographer pose when a photographer knows that a bride is wearing Louboutin shoes, of having them show the red soles. You want to make sure you've got as close to a uniform color on shoes like this, especially if they're going to be intended for a wedding. For applying the black paint, I was using a very fine tipped brush to get on the edge. So again, you want to be very careful with the size of the brushes that you use and making sure that your brushes are completely clean. One trick for keeping a brush moist is to use a Ziploc bag, and then you can keep the tip in there, and you can see from all the different layers, I would stick my brush back in the Ziploc bag and try to seal it up as best as possible. You could throw a rubber band on this here too, just to keep your brush nice and fresh. Because one of the things that I have a problem with is when I keep pulling out a new brush all the time, then the brush has to get re-moistened with paint. And if I can use a brush that's already had some paint saturation in it, I feel like I get slightly better results. I don't claim to be an artist. That's just my experience. If you're a professional artist, then you are miles ahead of me. Now to finish up the job, we're going to apply this Angelus acrylic finisher over the top. This looks like it's got kind of a white, milky color. A couple little things here. This is not intended to go on with the brush. It's intended to be sponged on or kind of dabbed on or wiped on. And so to do that, I'm going to be using a folded up blue shop towel here, because that won't tear like a paper towel would. And according to the directions here, do not apply excessive or rub for a long period of time. during wet or humid weather, drying time will be increased. Fairly common sense here. And so then we're going to go ahead and apply this. And now we will let those dry, and we will check back in once that is dry. After you've let the acrylic finisher do its job and dry, when I touch this here, it's a little bit more slippery than it was before. It's sealed up, but because of the wear on the bottom of these shoes from when they were worn before, there is still a little bit of traction on here, so this is not perfectly smooth and super slick. These don't obviously fit my feet, so I can't really test them, but I can tell just by feeling that there is definitely still a little bit of traction on these shoes here. If I were to keep applying enough of this acrylic finisher, it seems reasonable that I could probably get this to gloss up and be really slick, which I think undermines the point. But I think at this point, if we put the shoes down like that, and we lift up, I don't know that you'd be able to tell without looking at them very closely that the soles were refinished on these shoes. And so then hopefully with these soles refinished and cleaned up, when my sister-in-law gets married later on this year in 2020, she'll be able to wear the same shoes that my wife and her other sisters have worn. And I guess we call them the heirloom family wedding shoes, will continue on. And so then these $1,200 pair of shoes, which is a dollar value I can't believe I'm saying that someone would spend that on shoes, can carry on. Of course, the other alternative to that is you could use these products to be able to, is that you could use the process of the Angelus walk-on black, walk-on red, and the acrylic finisher to make other shoes turn into imitation Louboutin shoes. And maybe a lady in your life might appreciate that. Perhaps. If you're so inclined, or maybe I should say if you're sole inclined, there is a product known as sole stickers out there. And what these basically are some clear 3M sheets that you could stick on the bottom of these to preserve the finish. The quirk about these is you have to basically trace them and cut them to fit. And the other concern I have with this is kind of a slick plastic that I don't see there's any advantage in this providing any extra grip or adhesion. But again, depending upon the actual application, maybe this would be something you'd be interested in to be able to protect the soles, especially if you're only going to be wearing these on a hardwood dance floor or down the aisle at the church that you're getting married at or someplace of the like. And so that's another option. And I'm not going to cut these to fit, but I'm going to include these along with the shoes when these are presented to my sister-in-law, so then she can make the decision on how she wants to set up her shoes for her big day, because it's her big day, not my big day. I'm just the one refinishing the shoes for her. So with that, that's a look at the process of refinishing a pair of Louboutin heels after they've been worn and that the red has worn off on them. If you got any questions or comments, put it in the description below. Give it a thumbs up. Click the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Check back here for more great videos. Thanks and have a great day. Bye.